restricting the powers of prosecutors. Silvio Berlusconi's opponents accuse the Prime Minister of proposing the laws in order to dodge his own prosecution. Barnaby Phillips has more.
Silvio
Berlusconi announced the reforms with a bandage on his face.
Estetico a cui sono sottoposto.
He's had surgery to repair damage suffered when he was attacked in the streets 18 months ago. So what's the connection between these judicial reforms and his own well-publicized legal difficulties?
Zero, assolutamente zero. Questa riforma noi l'abbiamo...
Zero, absolutely zero. We've been planning this since 1994, when we entered politics. I've told young people from my party Forza Italia that I will never leave politics without first introducing this sort of reform into our judicial system.
So what exactly are Berlusconi's reforms? He wants a clear separation between judges and prosecutors, with less power for prosecutors. He wants judges to pay damages for mistakes. And he wants a more efficient system. Looming over Italy is the impending case of Berlusconi and the girl they call Ruby the Heart Stealer. He's accused of paying her for sex before her 18th birthday. They deny this, but his opponents say it's no coincidence that he's now trying to reform the judiciary.
He needs a diversion to talk about something else from that. And this provides him with a very, very powerful smokescreen and a platform upon which he can claim that the justice system is unfair, that investigative magistrates are politically biased, that the whole thing needs to be changed. And so that's why he's coming up now with this proposal of reform, I believe.
Over the years, Silvio Berlusconi has faced at least a dozen trials and many investigations, mostly on corruption charges. He's always maintained his innocence, but his many battles with the judiciary don't help his credibility as a legal reformer. Barnaby Phillips, Al Jazeera.
The Dalai Lama says he's stepping down as political head of the exiled Tibetan movement. He says it's time for a freely elected leader to take over. Elections are due later this month for a new prime minister to lead the Tibetan government in exile.
As early as the 1960s, I have repeatedly stressed that Tibetans need a leader, elected freely by the Tibetan people, to whom I can cede power. Now, we have clearly reached the time to put this into effect.
Well, both China and India will be watching developments with great interest. Our correspondents in New Delhi and Beijing have more on the reaction.
This comes just a few days after China has said during its annual session of the National People's Congress that the future Dalai Lama is to be reincarnated and not elected, presumably to allow the Chinese to select their reincarnation. Now, on Thursday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry came out with a typically strong response when it comes to Tibetan affairs.
The Dalai Lama is always a political figure in exile trying to split China in the long term in the name of religion. He's the leader of the Tibetan Independence Party, which is serving the independence of Tibet. In recent years, he has often claimed that he wanted to retire, but I think he's playing tricks with the international community.
The Dalai Lama retains his religious role, and in that sense, he remains the religious and spiritual figure of Tibetan Buddhism, which means that Tibetans will continue to view him as their leader. In that sense, he remains a threat to the Chinese, and this is not going to change the relationship between the Chinese and the Tibetan exile community. In fact, the Dalai Lama has come out to say that his possible reincarnation, the next Dalai Lama, will likely take place outside of China, possibly in India.
Here in the Tibetan district of New Delhi, the news that the Dalai Lama has stepped down from most of his political duties have come as a mixture of astonishment and even some relief owing to his old age. For thousands who've been living here, the Dalai Lama represents the embodiment of their spiritual faith, somebody who they look up to for strength and inspiration.
The Dalai Lama is not only our spiritual master, he is our God, he is our king, and we want freedom for our country.
One of the reasons why the Dalai Lama has taken this decision is because there's been a continuous debate about his role in the last few years. While on the one hand, older generations in settlements like these would like to see him continue in his present role, on the other hand, a more robust younger generation of Tibetans would like to see a more inclusive way of electing their representatives. There is that other issue of a succession crisis as well once the Dalai Lama passes away, as people fear that the Chinese may exploit it to create a vacuum within the Tibetan movement. So this strategy to elect a new prime minister in the next few days is directed at keeping up the momentum within the Tibetan movement alive. Prerna Suri, AlJazeera, New Delhi.
A major healthcare initiative in Pakistan is aiming to immunize 32 million children under the age of 5. The target is polio. Pakistan has 60% of the world's cases. Kamal Haider reports from the Swat Valley.
The war against the Pakistani Taliban may be under control for now, but a different battle is being waged in Swat. With a fund made available by the Gates Foundation, Pakistan has launched a massive program to provide immunization for 32 million children under the age of 5. The country has seen a rise of 65% in outbreak of the polio virus. In Swat, the virus found a safe haven, partly due to the ongoing conflict with the Taliban and because of the recent floods. Now that the military is firmly in control of this valley, the polio immunization program is back on track. But for Waqas and Waqar, two brothers now crippled by the virus, the lull in the fighting came too late.
The Taliban were threatening the immunization team not to work in the area, and that's why my children were deprived from polio drops and now suffering from polio.
Learning to live with their disability, the boys are still finding time to amuse themselves with a game of marbles. Waqas and Waqar may not be able to walk again, but for many other children, there is hope that they would not have to suffer the same fate. There are still many areas along the border with Afghanistan that aren't safe enough for immunization teams to visit. The real test of the stability for Swat is now to ensure that vaccine reaches those that need it most. Kamal Haider, AlJazeera, Swat.
Thousands of tons of construction material is on its way to Gaza after sitting on the Israeli border for 3 years. Nicole Johnson reports on why the desperately needed supplies have taken so long to reach Palestinian territory.
Millions of dollars worth of gravel bound for Gaza. This material is desperately needed to rebuild the strip. Instead, it's been stuck on the Israeli side of the border for over 3 years.
Ever since Israel imposed its siege on Gaza, construction material has been banned from the strip. But now these trucks are finally being allowed into the Sufa crossing to collect it, more than 70,000 tons of it.
We hope they will keep Sufa crossing open for the future. This quantity will support a lot of frozen projects and create job opportunities for a lot of unemployed workers and contractors. A lot of projects will start.
It's enough gravel to complete around 40 UN projects. But despite Israel's so-called easing of the siege, it's only agreed to allow supplies for 11% of the projects the UN has put forward. However, this week Israel did approve 2 new building projects worth over $100 million for houses